ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಆಧುನಿಕ ಭಾರತದ ವಿಜ್ಞಾನಿಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಮೊದಲ ಪಂಕ್ತಿಗೆ ಸೇರಿದ ಆದ್ಯರಲ್ಲಿ ಒಬ್ಬರಾದ ಆಚಾರ್ಯ ಪ್ರಫುಲ್ಲಚಂದ್ರ ರಾಯ್ ಅವರ 150ನೇ ಜನ್ಮದಿನ ವರ್ಷ ಇದು. ಆ ವಿಶೇಷ ಸಂದರ್ಭಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಸೇರಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ನಡೆಸ್ಕೊಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ನಮಗೆ ಈ ವೇದಿಕೆಗೆ ಪರಿಚಿತರೇ ಆದ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ GS ರಂಗನಾಥ್ ಆಗಮಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ವಿಜ್ಞಾನಿಗಳು, ಸಂಶೋಧಕರು, ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನ ಪ್ರತಿಷ್ಠಿತ ರಾಮನ್ ರಿಸರ್ಚ್ ಇನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಟ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಭೌತಶಾಸ್ತ್ರ ಪ್ರಾಧ್ಯಾಪಕರಾಗಿದ್ದರು. ಕಂಡೆನ್ಸ್ಡ್ ಮ್ಯಾಟರ್ ಫಿಸಿಕ್ಸ್, ಆಪ್ಟಿಕ್ಸ್ ಮೊದಲಾದ ಕ್ಷೇತ್ರಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರ ವಿಶೇಷ ಪರಿಣತಿ ಇದೆ. 3.5 ದಶಕಗಳಷ್ಟು ಕಾಲ ಸ್ನಾತಕೋತ್ತರ ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳಿಗೆ ಬೋಧನೆ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಭೌತಶಾಸ್ತ್ರಕ್ಕೆ ಸಂಬಂಧಿಸಿದ ಹಲವಾರು ವಿಷಯಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಜನಪ್ರಿಯ ಪ್ರವಚನಗಳನ್ನು ನೀಡುತ್ತಾ ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇಂಡಿಯನ್ ಅಕಾಡೆಮಿ ಆಫ್ ಸೈನ್ಸಸ್ ಹಾಗೂ ಇಂಡಿಯನ್ ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್ ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ಅಕಾಡೆಮಿ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರಮಟ್ಟದ ವಿದ್ವತ್ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಗಳ ಫೆಲೋ ಆಗಿ ನಿಯುಕ್ತರಾಗಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯ ಭೌತಶಾಸ್ತ್ರ ನಿಯಮಗಳಿಗೆ ಒಳಪಡದಂಥ ಹಲವಾರು ಪ್ರಕೃತಿ ವಿದ್ಯಮಾನಗಳಿಗೆ ಶಾಸ್ತ್ರೀಯ ವ್ಯಾಖ್ಯಾನ ನೀಡಿರುವ ಮಿಸ್ಟೀರಿಯಸ್ ಮೋಷನ್ಸ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಅದರ್ ಇಂಟ್ರೀಗಿಂಗ್ ಫೆನಾಮಿನಾ ಇನ್ ಫಿಸಿಕ್ಸ್ ಅನ್ನುವ ಒಂದು ಅಪೂರ್ವವಾದ ಗ್ರಂಥವನ್ನು ಬರೆದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ವಿಶೇಷವಾಗಿ ಹೇಳಬೇಕು ಅಂದರೆ ವಿಜ್ಞಾನಿಯಾದರೂ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ರಂಗನಾಥ್ ಅವರು ಸಂಗೀತ ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಗಾಢ ಆಸಕ್ತಿ ಇಟ್ಟುಕೊಂಡವರು. ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಸಂಗೀತವನ್ನು ಕೇಳೋದು, ಆಗಾಗ ಮನೆಯಲ್ಲಿಯೇ ಸಂಗೀತ ಕಚೇರಿಗಳನ್ನು ಏರ್ಪಡಿಸೋದು ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ರಂಗನಾಥ್ ಮತ್ತು ಅವರ ಪತ್ನಿ ಶ್ರೀಮತಿ ಮಂಗಳಾ ರಂಗನಾಥ್ ಅವರು ಇವತ್ತು ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅವರ ಹವ್ಯಾಸ. ಬರಹಗಾರರಾಗಿ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ರಂಗನಾಥ್ ಹಲವು ಅಪೂರ್ವವಾದ ಕೃತಿಗಳನ್ನು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ವಿಜ್ಞಾನಾಧಾರಿತ ಕಥೆಗಳ 4 ಸಂಕಲನಗಳು ಅವರದು ಪ್ರಕಟ ಆಗಿವೆ. ಅವುಗಳ ವಿಶೇಷ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇವಲ ವಿಜ್ಞಾನದ ಪ್ರಕ್ರಿಯೆಯನ್ನು ಬಳಸಿರೋದು ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು ಬಳಸಿ ಕೊಡುವ ವೈಜ್ಞಾನಿಕ ಮಾಹಿತಿ ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಕರಾರುವಾಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಇರೋದು. ಹೀಗೆ ಅದು ರಂಜನೆಯ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಬೋಧನೆಯನ್ನು ಉಂಟು ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ ಆ ಕಥೆಗಳು. ಈ ವೇದಿಕೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಹಿಂದೆ ಐನ್ಸ್ಟೈನ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ, ಪ್ರಾಣಿ ಪ್ರಪಂಚದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಅವರು ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸಗಳನ್ನು ನೀಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇವತ್ತು ಆಚಾರ್ಯ ಪ್ರಫುಲ್ಲಚಂದ್ರ ರಾಯ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಅವರು ಮಾತಾಡೋರಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ನಮಗೆಲ್ಲ ಗೊತ್ತಿರೋ ಹಾಗೆ 19ನೇ ಶತಮಾನದಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾರತದಲ್ಲಿ ಬ್ರಿಟಿಷ್ ಪ್ರಭುತ್ವ ನಡೆದಿತ್ತು. ಬ್ರಿಟಿಷ್ ಶಾಸಕ ವರ್ಗದವರು ಭಾರತವನ್ನು ರೂಪಿಸತೊಡಗಿದ್ದು ಬಹುಮಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಅವರ ಪ್ರಭುತ್ವದ ಅಗತ್ಯಗಳಿಗೆ ಪೂರಕವಾಗಿಯೇ. ಬ್ರಿಟಿಷ್ ಪ್ರವರ್ತಿತ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಕೂಡ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಅಪವಾದವಾಗಿರಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಇನ್ನು ಉದ್ಯಮ ಕ್ಷೇತ್ರದಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾರತದ ಅಭ್ಯುದಯಕ್ಕೆ ಪೋಷಣೆ ನೀಡಿರೋ ಮಾತು ಹಾಗಿರಲಿ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಹಿಂದಿನಿಂದ ಇದ್ದ ಉದ್ಯಮಗಳನ್ನು ಅವರು ನಿರ್ನಾಮ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು, ಇದ್ದ ಉದ್ಯಮಗಳನ್ನು ಅವರು ಕತ್ತು ಹಿಸುಕಿದ್ರು. ಆ ಕಥೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಅನೇಕರಿಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ. ಆದರೂ ಅಂಥ ಹಿನ್ನೆಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ವಂತ ಪ್ರತಿಭೆಯನ್ನು ಮೆರೆದು ವೈದ್ಯಶಾಸ್ತ್ರ, ಜೀವಶಾಸ್ತ್ರ, ರಸಾಯನಶಾಸ್ತ್ರ, ಭೌತಶಾಸ್ತ್ರ ಮೊದಲಾದ ಕ್ಷೇತ್ರಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾರತದ ಪ್ರತಿಷ್ಠೆಯನ್ನು ಬೆಳೆಸಿದವರು ಹಲವರು ಅಸಾಮಾನ್ಯ ಸಾಧಕರು. ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ದೇಶೀಯರಿಂದ ಆಧುನಿಕ ವಿಜ್ಞಾನ ಸಂಶೋಧನೆಗೂ ಆಧುನಿಕ ಪಾಶ್ಚಾತ್ಯ ವೈದ್ಯಶಾಸ್ತ್ರ ಮೊದಲಾದವುಗಳ ವ್ಯಾಸಂಗಕ್ಕೂ ಬುನಾದಿ ಹಾಕಿದವರು. ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಮಹೇಂದ್ರಲಾಲ್ ಸರ್ಕಾರ್. ಪಾಶ್ಚಾತ್ಯ ಜಗತ್ತಿನಲ್ಲಿಯೂ ಹೋಲಿಕೆ ಸಿಗದ ಮಟ್ಟದ ಜೀವವಿಜ್ಞಾನಿ ಅಂತ ಪಾಶ್ಚಾತ್ಯರಿಂದಲೇ ಪ್ರಶಂಸೆ ಪಡೆದ ಜಗದೀಶ್ ಚಂದ್ರ ಬೋಸ್ ಮೊದಲಾದವರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಕೇಳಿದ್ದೇವೆ. ಅದೇ ಸರಣಿಯ ಮತ್ತೊಬ್ಬ ಆದ್ಯರು ಪ್ರಫುಲ್ಲಚಂದ್ರ ರಾಯ್. ಭಾರತದಲ್ಲಿ ರಾಸಾಯನಿಕ ದ್ರವ್ಯ ಉದ್ದಿಮೆಗಾರಿಕೆಯ ನಿರ್ಮಾಪಕರು ಪ್ರಫುಲ್ಲಚಂದ್ರ ರಾಯ್. ಆದರೆ ಅವರದು ಬಹು ಆಯಾಮಿ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿತ್ವ. ಅವರು ಅಗ್ರಶ್ರೇಣಿ ವಿಜ್ಞಾನಿ ಮಾತ್ರ ಆಗಿರಲಿಲ್ಲ, ಅಪ್ರತಿಮ ದೇಶಭಕ್ತರು, ಸ್ವದೇಶಿ ಪ್ರಸ್ಥಾನದ ಅಗ್ರಣಿಗಳು, ಆಧುನಿಕ ವಿಜ್ಞಾನದ ಫಲವನ್ನು ಜನಜೀವನಕ್ಕೆ ಪೋಷಕವಾಗಿ ಅವರು ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಹೀಗೆ ರಸಾಯನಶಾಸ್ತ್ರ ಆಧಾರಿತ ಉದ್ಯಮ ಪ್ರಗತಿಯ ಶಿಲ್ಪಿ ಅಂತ ಪ್ರಸಿದ್ಧರಾಗಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಪ್ರಫುಲ್ಲಚಂದ್ರ ರಾಯ್. ಇದರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಅವರು ಸಮಾಜ ಸುಧಾರಕರಾಗಿದ್ದರು, ಮಹಾ ಮಾನವತಾವಾದಿಯೂ ಆಗಿದ್ದರು. ಅದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ವಿವರಗಳನ್ನು ನಾವು ಕೇಳೋರಿದ್ದೇವೆ. ಅವರು ಜಗದ್ವಿಖ್ಯಾತರಾಗಿದ್ದರೂ ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಸರಳ ನಿರಾಡಂಬರ ಜೀವನ ನಡೆಸಿ ಸಾತ್ವಿಕ ಜೀವನ ಮೌಲ್ಯಗಳ ಮೂರ್ತಿರೂಪವಾಗಿದ್ದರು. ತಾವು ಅಸೀಮ ಸಾಧನೆ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಲ್ಲದೆ ಒಂದು ಹೊಸ ವಿಜ್ಞಾನಿ ಪೀಳಿಗೆಯನ್ನೇ ಪ್ರಫುಲ್ಲಚಂದ್ರ ರಾಯ್ ಬೆಳೆಸಿದರು. ಅದು ಮಹತ್ವದ ಸಂಗತಿ. ನಮ್ಮ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕಕ್ಕೂ ಅವರು 2 ಸಲ ಭೇಟಿ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದರು. 1926ರಲ್ಲಿ ಮೈಸೂರು ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯಕ್ಕೆ ಬಂದು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕಾನ್ವೊಕೇಶನ್ ಅಡ್ರೆಸ್ ಕೂಡ ಪ್ರಫುಲ್ಲಚಂದ್ರ ರಾಯ್ ಅವರು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದರು. ಆ ದಿನಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರಫುಲ್ಲಚಂದ್ರ ರಾಯ್ ಅವರ ಇಲ್ಲಿಯ ಭೇಟಿ, ಅವರ ಮಾತುಕತೆಗಳು, ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸಗಳು ತುಂಬ ಸಂಚಲನೆಯನ್ನು ಸೃಷ್ಟಿ ಮಾಡಿತ್ತು. ಪಿ ಸಿ ರಾಯ್ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಈ ಸ್ಮರಣೀಯ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ನುಡಿನಮನ ಸಲ್ಲಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಸ್ವಯಂ ವಿಜ್ಞಾನಿಯಾದ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ GS ರಂಗನಾಥ್.
Thank you, sir, for those kind words of introduction. I am indeed honored to be here this evening to talk about one of the eminent sons of India who richly contributed to its cultural, scientific and industrial life. In fact, Dr. Ramaswamy has already briefly sketched the life and works of this extraordinary scientist. Sir Prafullichandra Ray, sometimes referred to as Prafullichandra Ray. This evening, I would like to share with you what I have come to appreciate about this extraordinary individual. Being a scientist myself, you will pardon me if I were to emphasize P.C. Ray, the scientist, more than P.C. Ray, the Gandhian, P.C. Ray, the industrialist, P.C. Ray, the social worker. I should, at the outset, make it very clear to you that not many, unfortunately, have heard of Prafullichandra Ray. You will pardon me if I were to share with you an experience I had recently. I do go out to colleges and schools and sometimes to universities. I just wanted to know the extent to which people were familiar with the life and works of Prafullichandra Ray. I was thoroughly disappointed to know very few had heard of him. Therefore, this is the right occasion to remember this great soul. I don't know why it has happened that way. Dr. Ramaswamy has often impressed me that there are good many great Indians who are unknown and unheard, unsung, but who have richly contributed to what all we can be proud of. At least in this context, I am extremely happy that the Gokhale Institute of Public Affairs took it upon itself to commemorate his 150th birth anniversary. I don't know whether his centenary was celebrated. I don't know. It happened in 1961. We did. Yes. Thank you, sir. I was just a 17-year-old boy then. I wasn't here. So with this brief introduction, I would like to dwell upon P.C. Ray with the background that prevailed when he appeared on the scene. There is a general impression that science is new to India. That is unfair. Possibly because of the European prejudice, this message has been spread around so much so, every Indian thinks that the science that we know is all implanted here by the Europeans. There is an unfair judgment of the Indian contribution to science. Keeping that in mind, I thought I would briefly sketch the Indian science. First we have the Vedic period. There is a general impression here, and I may be corrected if I am wrong, that the Atharvana Veda is a compendium of our early exercises in science. Then we have the golden age from 400 AD to 700 AD. This is where we find the extraordinary contributions to medicine, surgery, metallurgy, mathematics, astronomy. But very rarely we find this in our textbooks. That is how we miss them in our education. Then we come to what is called the dark age of Indian science, because all this sort of disappeared and the foreign rule appeared to have wiped out whatever was there of the great Indian science. Then we have the British rule. It is this period that is important to us here, because the great gentleman that I am about to talk about this evening was born, became prominent and richly contributed to Indian science during the British rule. This briefly summarizes the way things were prior to the British rule in this country, that is during the dark ages, as it has been referred to by the Indian scientists. Education was largely a Sanskrit system confined to scriptures, Vedas, Upanishads and epics. Then during the British Raj, Britishers were not interested in training us in either science or technology or whatever else that is useful to us. They were not interested in education itself. They were interested in trade, commerce, political control, and they treated the natives as slaves and exploited the communal and the caste hatred that prevailed in the society. Of course, they were directly or indirectly controlling the local kings and queens, who were also not interested in science in any form. They were probably interested in fine arts. Against this backdrop, we have to appreciate the efforts of some individuals. And the first such individual is actually a Scottishman, David Harry. He started the Hindu college, but no science was taught there. He was the head of that institution. He was a watchmaker, a silversmith. In fact, it is amazing that an European started an important college in Calcutta in 1817. And he writes that the Hindus were brighter than the European kids in this school. He is the first to record the capabilities of Indians. Then, like Dr. Ramaswamy did mention this extraordinary individual, Mahendralal Sarkar. He was himself a student of Hindu college. He became an eminent doctor with an MD, later turned out to be an homeopath, and he transformed the Hindu college into a medical college. That is how medical education became very important in this country, and Calcutta was the center of education in medicine. Not just that, Mahendralal Sarkar's contribution to Indian science is even to this day visible in the form of an institution that he started, namely the Indian Association of the Cultivation of Sciences. In fact, this is an important center of research in Calcutta today. It is directly funded by the Department of Science and Technology and is very well known for its contribution to various facets of physics. In fact, Professor Raman worked here. When he was actually the finance department, he made use of the facilities that were available at the Indian Association of Cultivation of Sciences. Then we have the next major step taken by Raja Ram Mohan Roy. You have all heard of him. But not many of you may know that he did try to get proper education started in this country. He wrote a letter to the Governor General advocating English education. Particularly, he emphasized that mathematics, natural philosophy, that is how physics is generally known even to this day. Chemistry, anatomy and other useful sciences should be taught to students. And somehow he thought that the right people to do this job are the people of talent and learning educated in Europe. This letter was ignored. The British government was not interested in educating Indians in any branch of science or technology. On the other hand, in 1835, Lord Macaulay introduced the English education, hoping to convert the Indians into a gang of slaves of the European civilization. I don't know whether he succeeded or not, but he did introduce English education in this country. So it is against this backdrop we should appreciate the emergence of a scientific culture in this country, and the eminent scientists who appeared on the scene had to work hard against the British system and had the strong willpower to go ahead with their ideas, and they were not slaves of the European fashion that was prevailing in science or technology. That is where they were strong individuals. Amongst these, some are very well known, so well known that the colleges and the schools I went to and the universities that I visited, when I talked to them, they could immediately reel off the names of these people effortlessly. J.C. Bose, Dr. Ramaswamy mentioned his name, Sir Jagadish Chandra Bose. In fact, you find his pictures even in high school textbooks. He was a physicist who narrowly missed the Nobel Prize for discovering the radio propagation. C.V. Raman, you all know him, the only Indian to have won the Nobel Prize in physics so far. Srinivasa Ramanujan, probably the only genius in mathematics that the subcontinent has produced. Then Meghnad Saha, Satyendranath Bose, H.J. Baba. Somehow everybody appears to be familiar with these names. They are all quite well known characters in physics or mathematics. Unfortunately, they couldn't name a person in medicine or engineering or chemistry and so on. And when I did mention the name of Sir P.C. Ray, very few had heard of his name, let alone know what he had done and what he was. In fact, some mistook him to B.C. Roy actually, because Ray is often pronounced as Roy in this country. So they said, B.C. Roy, the famous Chief Minister of Bengal, are you talking about him? Because he was a man of medicine also. See, there is this confusion. Therefore, I was somewhat disappointed, and I was extremely happy when Utthana invited me to write an article on this great son of India. And Dr. Ramaswamy provided me the necessary literature to read about him and to write about him. And he himself contributed considerably to my article. Later on, Lot more literature was available to me, and my talk is largely based on what I have gathered from the few books and articles that I have managed to get. Prafula Chandra Ray was a very eminent chemist of this country. In fact, he started a school of chemistry in Bengal, which flourished for a very long time and spread around the country. So, if physics is due to Raman, mathematics due to Ramanujan, then we should say chemistry in our country is due to P.C. Ray. But unfortunately, if you open any textbook, you find references to Raman, and here or there a reference to Ramanujan, but no reference whatever in any chemistry book to the work of P.C. Ray. I don't know why this has happened. Maybe our chemists should put some hard labor into whatever they write when it comes to textbooks while highlighting the Indian work. P.C. Ray was so very eminent that the Indian government could not ignore him. In fact, there was a national celebration in 1961, and the government of India brought out a stamp. In fact, we may laugh at the 15 naya paisa stamp now. But in 1961, 15 naya paisa was enough to go from one end of Bangalore to the other end of Bangalore. So it was a valuable stamp those days. This is to commemorate his birth centenary. And since I was very young then, I don't know what all happened in this country, and I am very happy to know that this institute did celebrate his birth centenary. Now we have, 50 years later, another opportunity to remember the life and works of this extraordinary son of India. Very briefly, I will display here his life and the personality that he was. I wish this lecture had been slated for next month, then truly would have completed his 150th year. He was born on 2nd August 1861. He died on 16th June 1944, the year I was born. He collected his Doctor of Science degree from the University of Edinburgh. By profession, he was a scientist, and in that he specialized in chemistry. If this were all that one had about him, probably he wouldn't have been as great as he really was. In fact, he had other extraordinary features. He was a very great industrialist, a highly respected social worker, and a true Gandhian to the core. It is very rare to find this mix of science with these capabilities. You hardly find a scientist who is an industrialist. You rarely come across an industrialist or a scientist who is a social worker. They live in their own world of pleasure or profit. And all the more it is difficult to find one who leads the extremely simple life that Gandhi spread around, was convinced by his philosophy. In fact, P.C. Ray didn't marry. He remained a celibate to the end of his life. He was an extremely simple man, always wore Qadar. So much so he was called Sir Qadar, because in this country we don't address elders by name. So now let us look at this in detail to the extent possible. P.C. Ray was born to Harishchandra Ray and Bhuvana Mohini Devi. They had 4 sons and 2 daughters. Jnaneshwar Chandra, the first son, Nilakanta, the second son, Prafulla Chandra was the third son, fourth son Buddhadev passed away as a young kid. Among the daughters, the first daughter is Indubati, Belamati passed away again as an young girl. Prafulla Chandra was born in their ancestral home in Raroli in Bangladesh on 2nd August 1861. I would like to mention here that Harishchandra Ray, though was a petty businessman, was also very much interested in education. In fact, often he would invest his money in ventures that wouldn't bring profit to him, because the interest of that business was not truly money, it was equivalent to spreading knowledge around. In fact, he started even a school where his own son studied. Bhuvana Mohini Devi was an accomplished housewife, a highly cultured lady, and good many things Prafulla Chandra imbibed from his mother. As I told you earlier, he had his early education in Raroli, in the Middle English School founded by his father. That is simply because there was no school whatever in that little town. So his father started the school. He was meeting all the expenses of the school. That is how he was actually losing money in this game. So Prafulla Chandra studied in this school. But since the whole business collapsed and Harishchandra Ray could not manage his family with the income that he was getting from the various sources, he wanted to seek greener pastures by moving over to the capital of Bengal, namely Calcutta. He, with his family, moved over to Calcutta in 1870. There, Prafulla Chandra was admitted to that famous David Harry School, the Hindu school that had been started by him, the Harry School. Later on, he was shifted to Albert School. I don't have much to say here, excepting that he was a very frail kid, wouldn't attend the classes often, and was not very active in the class either. There is not much to say that he would be one day a very bright scientist of this country. So you don't find the symptoms and the signs of a great man at any stage here. He was a very ordinary kid. Then he was admitted to the Metropolitan College to do his BA. It is here that he developed some interest in science, and he records that he was inspired to take to science by reading the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. But Benjamin Franklin was not a chemist, but I don't know what made him to take to chemistry. They are not very clear here. His interest in chemistry was such that he took as an optional subject in his BA, and strangely, those days, chemistry was a part of fine arts. And chemistry was not being taught in the Metropolitan College because there was nobody to teach. See, this is the lack of expertise in science. So he went to Presidency College as an external student. He was doing his BA here, and in his spare time he would go to Presidency College, attend classes in chemistry. There he was taught by Professor Pedler, who was a very well-known chemist, who was well-known for his research contributions to chemistry. Because one thing is to be taught by a good teacher, but another thing is to be exposed to the grandeur of chemistry by one who was practicing chemistry, who was contributing to chemistry. That is where P.C. Ray was converted from being just interested in chemistry to one who would dabble in chemistry later in life. In fact, we owe a lot to Pedler, who transformed this young boy to a scientist. He transformed him to such an extent that the young boy started building a chemistry laboratory of his own in his house. So here you find a chemist in making. He was in his BA class. He was in his teens. I don't know how many would be interested in building their own laboratories. And his father was not a rich man either. So he built a small chemical laboratory at home, fabricated many little equipments that are necessary for simple experiments. In particular, he designed and fabricated the oxyhydrogen blowpipe. Here you have that oxygen enters through this tube, hydrogen enters through the tube, then it can be ignited. It's a very hot flame. It is a very explosive mixture also. In fact, he nearly killed himself and blew the house. In other words, he was not afraid of indulging in chemistry of this type. He played around with many chemicals because he strongly believed in learning by doing, not by reading and repeating as we find today. Our kids learn by memory. They don't want to dabble in anything that they are taught either in the classroom or they read in the books. But he was very different by nature. He believed in learning by doing, and he liked to do experiments very much. It's here I would like to say a little that is important. Harishchandra Ray, though a businessman, knew the value of education, and he knew how Bengal in general and Calcutta in particular didn't have the facilities for a good system of education. So he wanted at least one of his sons to be educated in England, because that was the fashion of those times. Rich people sent their kids to England to be trained in one or the other area of their interest. In fact, Nehru himself had all his education there. Tagore had all his primary education in England. So that's how the rich people were. And Harishchandra Ray was well aware of this, and it was his dream to see one of his sons at least in England. And whether he wanted his son to be a scientist or not is not very clear. He wanted his son to be educated in England. And he had shared this desire of his with his children. And P.C. Ray was well aware of his father's desire. So even while doing his BA, he thought he would try for a scholarship to study in England. And this is the famous Gilchrist Scholarship. In fact, very many in his class, including his teachers, laughed at him, because this was an international fellowship and they would select students from all over the world, and one had to pass this examination creditably and be at the top, because they would select some 12 or 13. So he had to be in the 10 or 12 in the world to be selected for this Gilchrist Scholarship. It is an international scholarship awarded by the University of Edinburgh, United Kingdom. In fact, many of his students and many of his teachers laughed at him, but young Ray had confidence in himself, and he thought he could do well, because he was not like any other kid. He was not a bookworm. He had gone beyond the books. He had known more than what the teacher had taught in the classroom. He had himself experimented with many things. So he was extremely confident about what he could do even in an examination like that. But he wasn't sure still whether he was at the international level to pass an examination like this. So much so he didn't even care to know the results. One day one of his teachers told him, "Look here, your name has appeared in the list of people who have passed this examination." He was shocked and surprised, and that is how he secured this Gilchrist Scholarship and left for England in 1882. Those were the days when the middle class, particularly the upper caste middle class, didn't send their kids abroad for various reasons. They thought they would get spoiled. It was invariably happening that way. Secondly, there were cultural hang-ups that one should not cross the seas and so on. It's amazing that his mother stood by him, and his father always wanted him to go out. So that's how the family encouraged him to undertake this trip. And in 1882, at the age of 21 years, he left for Edinburgh. He did not complete his BA. How many would dare to give up something that was within their grasp, like a BA degree, with which he could become a capable servant of the British Empire? He gave up that opportunity and took a big chance at the age of 21 years when he sailed to England. He joined the University of Edinburgh to do his BSc. This time, you can look at the sort of subjects that was being taught those days: chemistry, physics, zoology and botany. So he decided to study these, and in particular, he had the opportunity of studying chemistry under one Professor Alexander Crumb Brown, the well-known person who had richly contributed to inorganic chemistry. So he collected his BSc degree from Edinburgh University. But didn't stop there. We should not forget, he didn't go to England to collect a degree like this and return to become somebody again in the British Empire. That burning desire to become a scientist was very much in him. He had himself dabbled in chemistry when he was young. So that drew him forward. And he decided to work for his doctorate under the same Alexander Brown. Then in 1887, within 5 years, he got his DSc degree. This was on the periodic classification of elements. I will not go into the details of that, but the thesis was so good, it earned him a special prize, the Hope Prize. In other words, he was excelling in everything that he handled. He took very seriously his studies, his research and so on. Not only that, something that I have not written here, I don't mind sharing with you. He is equally concerned about the freedom movement in India. In fact, there was a coterie of Indians who were working for the cause of the freedom in this country, and often there would be talks and whatnot. He wrote an essay on the Sepoy Mutiny. Though that didn't fetch him a prize, it was highly appreciated. In other words, he had a deep concern for the fact that India was not a free country. He was indulging in such political activities as well. Then he returned to India in 1888 with his DSc degree, and as once Professor Raman said in National College, I was a young boy then, many went abroad and returned with LLDs, landladies' daughters, but he returned with a DSc degree. So he had achieved something that was remarkable, but he was too highly qualified to get a job in this country. Could not get a job and remained unemployed for nearly 1 year. With a doctorate from a foreign university and having worked under an eminent chemist, he was surprised and shocked that he couldn't get a reasonable job in this country. Maybe even to today this is somewhat true, but this is all the more true those days. In fact, I should tell you here that when he was in England, he came in contact with Sir, who became Sir later, Jagadish Chandra Bose, who was doing his BSc in Cambridge. That is because Cambridge was not only well known, only rich people could get into Cambridge. Jagadish Chandra Bose was born to a rich family, so he could get into Cambridge easily, while P.C. Ray had to accept the position in Edinburgh, where some scholarship was available for him to pursue his studies. So they had known each other, and when he returned from England and he was employed for nearly a year, he was a guest of Dr. and Mrs. J.C. Bose. He stayed in their house. In fact, I have often wondered what he did in that 1 year period. I have read here and there that he went round looking at the flora and the fauna because J.C. Bose was in botany and so on, and was even imagining writing a book on physics, chemistry, botany and zoology. He had these things in mind. But why he didn't go to the Indian Association of the Cultivation of Sciences is not clear to me. After all, he was not getting money anywhere. He could have made use of the facilities there to spend time in science. I don't have the right answer, possibly because it didn't have a chemistry lab. You know, Raman could do his physics experiments with whatever was available there, but chemistry demands purchasing chemicals and whatnot, and possibly the laboratory started by Mahendra Lal Sarkar didn't have these facilities. That is my guesswork. I am not swearing by that, nor have I read that way. But it came to me, after all, even Raman was looking for a place to do his physics because he was in the finance department. And then he came across the association and made use of the facilities that were available there, published many research papers. Only later he was absorbed by the Calcutta University. But for some reason, P.C. Ray appears to have kept himself away from this famous institution, which was already was well known to people there. Then after a year or so, he got the position of an assistant professor in the Presidency College. In fact, I may as well tell you here that J.C. Bose also was offered the position of an assistant professor in the same college on a salary close to this 250 rupees per month. It is an enormous sum by present day calculations, but it was not the sort of salary they were giving to the Europeans. Europeans were collecting 3 times this salary, while the natives were given only 1/3 of that, nearly 250 rupees. J.C. Bose was so humiliated, he refused to accept this salary. He worked in Presidency College without accepting the salary, possibly because he was already a rich man. But Ray couldn't live like that. He was already a guest of J.C. Bose. So he thought he would accept whatever offer was available to him. He accepted his position. It was a very humiliating offer in the sense of that he had a foreign degree. In fact, he meets the head of the institution and says, "Who are you?" "I am a doctorate from a foreign university in chemistry." That man doesn't care. He looks at his color and not his capabilities. So this is all that he could offer, and he had to accept it because otherwise he would continue to be a guest of J.C. Bose. So that is how he started his life in Presidency College as an assistant professor of chemistry. However humiliating the situation was, he had to accept that. I don't know how many would live happily under those circumstances, because the white men around were collecting 3 times more salary and were not any more capable. In fact, some of them were not even capable. So at Presidency College, he started teaching chemistry, but he did not degenerate to a formal teacher. That is what happens to most people. He started doing research. It is remarkable that Presidency College, which did not have the facilities to do research, had nothing to offer him in that sense. But he started on his own with problems of practical relevance. See, this is where you find a chemist who is concerned about society. He is not one of the ivory tower scientists that we have in our country. He was a chemist down to earth in the real sense of the word. So his first problem, he had not worked on such problems in Edinburgh. There he had worked on the periodic table of elements and he had published few papers on inorganic chemistry. But here, it is not inorganic chemistry. It is down to earth, what may be called nutrition chemistry. Bengalis live mostly on ghee and mustard oil. This is the essential part of their daily diet. And don't think that crooks are of recent origin. They have been there all the time. So these were highly adulterated even those times. In 1800s, they were adulterating these 2 ingredients to a large extent. So he struggled for nearly 3 years to work out a methodology whereby one could evaluate the quality of ghee or the mustard oil. It was not easy chemistry. He had no formal training in this sort of chemistry. So for once he decided to do the unknown. And that's how he took a very long time, came up with the methodology to identify the quality of ghee and the mustard oil and how to purify it and what not. And he published this. This is the first paper that he published after he landed here in 1894. In fact, he did not publish it in any foreign journal. He published this in the Journal of Asiatic Society of Bengal. The title of the paper was Chemical Examination of Certain Indian Foodstuffs, Fats and Oils. A paper from a person who had worked in periodic tables and inorganic chemistry. So you find that he was a chemist, an all-round chemist, and not a narrow specialist. And this was a very important problem. Throughout his life, you will find his concern for the people. Here, he addressed himself to a problem that was prevailing in that society. The oils and the fats that were being sold were highly adulterated, and he was wondering whether he could pinpoint the problems and solve and provide people with what may be called better food. So this is the first paper that he published, and till then the Asiatic Society of Bengal, I don't know what they were bothered about, probably not science. This is the first time a scientific paper appeared in that journal. Then he continued. As I told you, he was by training an inorganic chemist, and there was a feeling that certain compounds of mercury would be very difficult to make because they are generally unstable. He wondered whether this was a prejudice or a product of deep research. So it was generally an impression and had not been pursued in great detail by the workers in this area. So he thought this would be a simple problem for him to address himself, to see whether the general impression that he found in literature that compounds of mercury are not all that stable, particularly the nitrates, whether that was right or wrong, he wanted to establish. And in the process, he discovered that a particular nitrate of mercury, mercurous nitrate, was quite stable. In fact, he had sort of overturned the textbook knowledge and overnight become a chemist of international repute. So what had been written and said and passed on from generation to generation was proved to be wrong. And he found many more nitrates. In fact, he manufactured ammonium nitrate. And the first paper in this area was again published in the Journal of Asiatic Society of Bengal. What a wrong journal to publish. You would rather publish your science in scientific journals. But he was not rich enough to send his papers abroad. Generally, people sent their papers abroad those days, but they were all very rich. But he did not have the money, so he published it in the available journal. This made him world famous. How do we know that he became so famous? Eminent chemists of the time hailed his work as a milestone in chemistry. In particular, Roscoe, Berthelot, Victor Mayer and others specially appreciated this work. By then he had produced many nitrates and he was called the king of nitrates. So he had established himself as a chemist of international repute. In fact, overnight, the obscure Asiatic Society of Bengal, the Journal of Asiatic Society of Bengal, became internationally an acclaimed journal. So much so, Nature, a very renowned journal in science, wrote like this. In fact, I am lifting it from Nature. The Journal of Asiatic Society had not been a very familiar sight in a chemical laboratory so far, but it now deserved the attention of all concerned because of the researches of the Bengali chemist Dr. Prafulla Chandra Ray. That is how Nature appreciated this journal. This journal overnight, it like a college magazine becomes an international journal. It became more or less like that. And that was largely due to the science and the research that P.C. Ray did and communicated to it. In fact, there is a general impression that unless you publish abroad, you will be unknown. That is not true. A good work will finally get round and people will get to know. It may take a little more time, but the scientific community cannot and will not ignore a good piece of work. So that is the message that probably he has conveyed here, and we should appreciate, because the present day scientists spend a lot of foreign exchange in communicating their research to foreign journals. Unfortunately, the whole system is highly skewed. Unless you publish your papers in a foreign journal, you are not sure of being promoted. So if you are worried about your career, one thing feeds the other. So I don't know, I don't have a special solution for this. I have myself been a victim of this. P.C. Ray was not a narrow specialist in chemistry. In fact, he was a well-read man, and he was deeply impressed by the alchemists of Greece, by the famous French synthetic chemist Berthelot. See, in 1897 he wrote to Berthelot asking him about the chemistry of the old ages, because he had already worked a lot and he had known a lot, whether he had something more to say about chemistry of the old ages. In turn, Berthelot asks Ray about Hindu chemistry. He says, young man, do you know what European people have done? Don't bother about what was done in Europe. Why don't you write something about what Indians had done in chemistry? And within a short time, without spending too much effort, he came up with an article, Rasendra Sara Samagraha. And this was published by Berthelot. He sent it to Berthelot. Berthelot wanted some information about Hindu contribution to chemistry, and he wrote this article, and Berthelot published this in Journal des Savants. Then this led to this initial exercise of writing a small article on Indian contribution to chemistry, led him to a very big exercise. He was deeply impressed by the work done by Indians, particularly the Hindus, and he spent nearly 12 years collecting information on the Indian contribution to chemistry, and he wrote 2 volumes, the History of Hindu Chemistry. The first volume was published in 1901, the second volume was published in 1908. In fact, we should all be extremely proud. Somewhere or the other, you will come across the contribution of Indians to surgery, to medicine, to astronomy, to mathematics. But you don't have such a record when it comes to either chemistry or physics. Many are working in the direction, but the first gentleman to show that it is worth knowing about Indian contribution to chemistry, the glorious past that India had in chemistry, we owe it to P.C. Ray. In fact, he is extremely well known for these 2 volumes. Now he had become an international figure, and at this stage you find another great man entering the scene, Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee. I think he was Shyam Prasad Mukherjee's father. He was the Vice Chancellor of Calcutta University and also the Chief Justice of the Calcutta High Court. Very rarely you find judges and Vice Chancellors being this eminent these days. So he was trying hard to make Calcutta University a center of excellence for this country. And Calcutta till then didn't have formal research in science. They had some teaching colleges here and there. Then he pushed this matter through the Senate, and in 1912, in fact he was largely responsible for introducing a University College of Science and Technology under the banner of the Calcutta University, where research would be the main activity and not teaching. In fact, he writes a letter to P.C. Ray. We request you to establish this College of Science and Technology. because he was a practicing scientist. This responsibility cannot be assigned to teachers who could just teach, but to establish a research institute calls for extraordinary talents. A man who had dabbled in research only can do that job very well, and Ashutosh Mukherjee could quickly find that talent in this man simply because Ashutosh Mukherjee was himself an eminent mathematician. He was not a lawyer who had become an advocate or a vice chancellor. Ashutosh Mukherjee was a mathematician of European fame. He had become the fellow of the mathematical societies of Europe. Therefore, he could easily find out the right man for this job, and he requested this person to start this. But where is the money? P.C. Ray was not a rich man. He can do the things provided to give him the money. Then I am not well aware of the history as to how Taraknath Pallit appeared on the scene. He donated 14 lakh rupees. Even to this day 14 lakhs is a meaningful number. But in those days in 1912 he donated 2 of his houses and 14 lakhs. And then one Raspberry Ghosh donated 26 lakhs. I think something can be done with 26 lakhs even now. Then Kumara Guru Prasanna Singh donated 5 lakhs. He was the Maharaja of a small place. With all this money, the college could be started, and it was started in the 2 houses donated by Taraknath Pallit. Pallit had made it very clear that they should appoint Indians on the faculty of this college, and the Britishers were opposed to this, because those days one had to seek the permission of the British for anything and everything. But they came in the way of this being started simply because Taraknath Patil wanted only Indians to be there. They said, how can, they had promised a very huge salary of 1000 rupees per month. So I said, no Indian deserves so much salary. Only an European can undertake research. Only an European can start an institute like this. Only an European can fit into this. So they objected a lot. It took a pretty long time, but I think we should be eternally grateful to Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee, who could push through, and finally it took shape in the form of the University College of Science, and they started with 2 professorships, 1 in chemistry and 1 in physics. And P.C. Ray was appointed the first Pallit professor of chemistry. So he was in Presidency College till then, don't forget. So he retired from the Presidency College and joined this science college. Of course, just within 5 years he retires. He establishes this. He is active. I cannot go into the details of the science he did here. He published very many papers. But that is the symptom of an active research institute. And then he retired after 5 years. But his contributions were so very important and significant that the Calcutta University extended its services by 5 more years. But he was a very different man. See, these days people crawl and beg to get extensions. Calcutta University extended services, but Ray accepts the offer, but donates all his salary, 1000 rupees per month. Those days it was an enormous number, to the development of the chemistry department of the college. So he freely works in that institute, and the entire salary goes towards the development of the chemistry department of the science college. So he is a rare brand scientist. He is not just a scientist, he is a great human being. In fact, I may tell you here, in the 5 years he donated 60,000 rupees, which made this a top class chemistry laboratory in the country. And it became the mecca of research in chemistry for the Indians. Just as Raman converted the Association of Cultivation of Sciences as the mecca of research in physics, and all the people would go there to work with him, he converted this into a great center of research in chemistry. He starts an active school of research in chemistry. Many research papers pour out from the department. It is here that he became aware of another big problem that the scientists faced. I will come to that at a later stage. How to encourage science was his big problem. Therefore, he instituted a prize in the name of Nagarjuna. He was deeply impressed by the contributions of Nagarjuna to Indian chemistry. In fact, while writing the 2 books on Hindu chemistry, he had come across the great work of this Buddhist sage, Nagarjuna. In 1922, Ray instituted the Nagarjuna Prize, a gold medal of 100 rupees those days, which is approximately 50,000 rupees now, and cash of 500 rupees. Not for anybody and everybody, for best piece of research work carried out in chemistry for any student of this college, that is all. So that there is really the talent is being encouraged. It is not a national prize to be given to anybody. It is a prize to be given to the best work done there by a student, not the teacher or some big man who invariably swallows the work of an younger fellow. So he probably knew this problem. So he saw to it that the prize went to the right person, a young student who would contribute richly to chemistry. And this way, chemistry flourished in that department. Then these young scientists had difficulties in publishing their papers abroad, lack of money. Therefore, he starts the Indian Journal of Chemistry, the Indian Chemical Society with its proceedings, and he was the first president of that, so that these young scientists could publish their research work in this. It is also remarkable. This is what Raman also did. He also had problems of sending the papers of his group to European journals. Then the Indian Journal of Physics took birth and he published. And they were doing work at such a high caliber that the world had to take a look at these journals as well. That is true of the proceedings of the Indian Chemical Society. In other words, they were to the core Indian scientists. They were not trying to do all this to please anybody. Probably it is around this time that Ray wanted science to be meaningful to this country. How can science serve society? Started haunting him. Very rarely scientists are bothered about this. As long as I get my salary and I publish my paper, I don't care what happens to that paper or what happens to the society. But he had a deep concern for society. So he started wondering how science could serve society. This is a very relevant question even to this day, and society at large does not respect the Indian scientist because the Indian scientist is said to have let down the society. Unfortunately, that may be true, but he was a different man. He addressed himself to this important question: how science can serve the society? Answer: open an industry which is dependent on science, not any industry. Then if you look at what happens in such an exercise, the benefits they produce from this industry will be useful to society. Means this industry should produce that which is useful to society, and then there will be a workforce in the industry that will solve the unemployment problem. Because the Britishers were not bothered about all this. They didn't want to manufacture anything that would help people in this country, nor did they want to solve the problem of unemployment. They were just trying to loot. In fact, they wanted the Indians to buy the European products so that our money would go out of this country. So he thought that he would solve two problems: look at the needs of the society and provide them what they want, and the workforce necessary to produce this product would solve the unemployment problem. The government was least interested in such ventures. So in 1901, he started his own industry, the Bengal Chemicals, the famous Bengal Chemicals that is alive even to this day. It's a very important industry even now. It became a joint stock company in 1901, more than 100 years ago. It went through its teething problems. They thought of manufacturing sulfuric acid because every damn thing was being imported those days. See, therefore they wanted to replace things that were being imported. But unfortunately, they did not have the right equipment to start this on a large scale. In fact, he did visit a lab where this was being made. It was so filthy that On an industrial scale, one could not produce sulfuric acid. He gave up the idea. Then they started making citric acid from lemon. Lemon has citric acid in it. Because citric acid was being sold in the market by the Britishers. So he thought he would replace them with the local citric acid. But unfortunately, he had to give up this because it became a very expensive product. He could not compete with the Britishers. Then he started making drugs, chemicals and pharmaceuticals. This is where he hit the gold mine. It is a very profitable business. In fact, when he made the drugs, he made many Ayurvedic drugs also and reproduced many drugs that were being imported from Europe, in particular Britain. And the local doctors were not supportive of this exercise. They would still prescribe the medicine made elsewhere. So he had to fight hard and convince them that his drug was in no way inferior to the corresponding European drug. So he had to struggle hard. This is where his business acumen became a very handy tool, because I would like to share with you an experience that he had as a young boy. I forget, somebody in the family had written a book, some 1,000 copies of it, which could not be sold. And this young man managed to sell those 1,000 copies. So he knew the art of selling. So that business acumen helped him in pushing his produce the drugs, chemicals and pharmaceuticals. And it is a spectacular success. So here is a brief history. It was started with a capital of 800 rupees. See, his own salary per month was 1,000, let me tell you. It was a workforce of 10 people. So it was a factory with 10 people with 800 rupees. So now let us look at the progress of this institution. In 1904, it had a capital of 23,000, 70 workers and sales 25,000 and all. In 1915, approximately 10 years later, 4 lakh, it's a very big amount, same workforce and double the sales. In 1926, all this happened during the British Raj. I think very rarely factories succeed like this in independent India. 1926, now it had 19 lakhs as capital investment, 1,400 people, so what a big rise in the workforce, and 25 lakhs for the sales. Then in independent India, 1963, 79 lakhs, 5,000 and 2 crore 34 lakhs. So it is one extraordinary history of a very successful industry started by an academician, a down-to-earth chemist who was interested in research papers, laboratory chemistry and so on. But his concern for the unemployment, his concern for the society, so that the society would consume what is produced here and not import from elsewhere, was the spirit behind this. But the factory did not just produce this, it did many other things. In particular, they came up with a fire extinguisher called a Fire King. And the British Army was impressed by this. They started buying this in lots. There was a great demand for this particularly from the army. So Ray thought that he should reward the person who came up with this device. And he gave the inventor 1 lakh rupees. 1 lakh is an enormous money. He encouraged that inventor with 1 lakh rupees. Not only that, he was concerned about the employees. His salary as the director of the factory was 500 rupees per year, not per month, per year. With this, he established a fund for the benefit of employees. His shares in the company was around 56,000 rupees. He established a trust with this money. The trust looked after the welfare of rural people and advancement of khadi culture. This is where by then he had been converted by Gandhi. In fact, he was a very strong critic of Gandhi. I will later on come to that. But he had become a typical Gandhian and he was impressed by the khadi culture. because he said that solves partly the unemployment problem in the rural sector. With all the money generated by his capabilities, he was not a typical capitalist. He was a very, very generous person. So someone has sat down and found out all these numbers. His total earnings in his life was 5.5 lakhs, and his donations was 4,95,000 rupees. See, he donated 95% of his earnings. As a pilot professor, he got a salary of 1,000 rupees per month, and he used only 40 rupees for himself, and the rest was donated. See, that was the generosity of this individual. Here I may as well recollect one anecdote that I have read. I forget whether it is Brahma Samaj or Arya Samaj, I forget. He was a sympathizer of this movement. So the chief of that organization approaches him. See, we have run out of money. We want some support from you. They knew that he was a very generous person. So he calls his assistant. He was a student. In fact, he lived in a small room in Science College. Till death he lived there. He led a very, very simple life. So he called him and said, find out how much balance is there in my account. 3,500 rupees. So he gives a check for 3,000 rupees. He would donate money like this, but the same morning he had chastised this young fellow for having spent little more money on his soap or something like that. He would not spend money on his own, but he would generously donate. So he was a well-known figure when it came to supporting the right causes. Now I would like to summarize very briefly his scientific achievements. He published about 120 research papers. Of course, he is very well known even to this day for the history of Hindu chemistry, which appeared in 2 volumes in 1902 and 1908. He also wrote, in fact, he actually wanted to write textbooks in physics, chemistry, zoology and botany. And then he decided to write in first book on zoology because people see animals all around. So he decided to write that book. I don't know how people write textbooks these days. He did not just want to copy some other book and write. He could have copied an European book, literally. He wanted to become a zoologist himself. So he learnt the art of dissection from one Dr. Nitin Sarkar. He dissected carcasses of many animals. So in other words, he learnt zoology and wrote a textbook of zoology, which he says is simple zoology. Very few of us would write anything after going through an exercise like this. Textbooks are written these days to make money. Often they are all wrong here and there. But he had put his heart and soul into whatever he did. Of course, he wrote very many popular articles in English and Bengali. I will just select a few of them here because of his concern to propagate science around, spread science amongst the masses. One of the articles on makers of modern chemistry, the discovery of oxygen, chemical synonyms, chemical research at Presidency College, because people must know what this college is doing. Then of course, elementary inorganic chemistry. In other words, he was to the core a scientist. But then he was not just that, he was a true nationalist. He was strongly influenced by Gokhale, Gandhiji and Chittaranjan Das and maybe many others. But he makes special mention of these people. In fact, I may as well tell you here an incident. He once had to travel with Gokhale to England. Where they were sailing in the ship, they find a white man, they share coffee, and while sipping coffee, Gokhale says, we are not spending enough on education. That is what is responsible for the poverty in this country. So that white man says, what do you mean, sir? Have you not spent already a lot? Then Gokhale says, what do you mean by saying, have you spent? Is that your money? You mean to say Britain is spending money on Indian education? You are looting our money. You are taking away our money for your pleasures. If anything, negligible fraction of it might be going to the Indian education. In other words, he had that personal interaction with Gokhale, and P.C. Ray recollects these events in his life. Of course, he was completely impressed by Gandhiji. He was opposed to Gandhiji at one stage in his life. In fact, many scientists and engineers were not favorable to Gandhiji to start with. Now, I think Sir M.V. himself had differences with Gandhiji when it came to certain things. But finally, he had to accept the extraordinary qualities of this great soul. And he first arranges the first entry of Gandhiji to Calcutta. So, on that platform, Gandhiji says, Acharya Prafulla Chandra has been violently criticizing my creed to the effect that Charka was an absolute in the age of science. But you see, he is spinning it himself today. So, he had become a Gandhian in that sense. Gokhale described him as a political saint, because though he was a scientist, he was equally concerned about the political turmoil, the freedom movement, and in a way tried to contribute to that, to write about that. So much so, on a public platform where Chittaranjan Das presided, he said, science can afford to wait, but Swaraj cannot. He was impressed by these people. So, he was prepared to give up science for the cause of Swaraj. Now, I come to the other facet of this person, his concern for the society. There was a very shattering famine in 1921, floods in 1922. The government didn't care for the welfare of people. The government was insensitive to the problems of people. P.C. Ray was moved by the plight of people and started collecting donations from the public. He went round. His office in College of Science, his room became the center for this activity, and he collected 3 lakhs from the public. Not only that, he sent out letters to his friends in Europe and America and to other people in industry. Don't forget, he was an industrialist, therefore he had contacts with industry and many social organizations. They all contributed 7 lakhs. In fact, by present day analysis, you would say this is a very huge collection by an individual. But this brought him in contact with people, and he says, through this famine, I have been able to dream of a united India. In spite of different climates, different languages, India is undivided, because money was pouring from various parts of India, though only Bengal was affected. So, he thought that some social cause like this can unite a country as well. So, now I summarize. The other things that he got, this is for those who want to know, was he recognized at all for all this work? He had many honors. He collected his CIE. I don't know, I am a post-independent fellow. So, what does this mean? I do not know. Maybe the Cavalier of Indian Empire. Commander, is it? Commander, yes. He got an honorary doctorate from the Durham University. He became the president of All India Social Reformers Conference. See, his contribution to social causes was so impressive that he became the president of that in 1917. In 1918, he was knighted. For the present day chaps, knighted means he was called a sir. He became a Sir Prafulla Chandra Ray. Then he became, see, he was active in politics, became the president of the Utkal Province Congress, Provincial Congress. president of the Indian Chemical Society, president of the Bangya Sahitya Parishad. In fact, he contributed richly to Bengali literature, popularized science. In fact, Rabindranath Tagore, who was his contemporary, read with lot of interest and affection his articles. He became the honorary fellow of the Chemical Society of London. In other words, by all descriptions and all yardsticks that you can invent, he was truly a very successful chemist, a successful industrialist, a very prominent social worker, and a very visible Gandhian. It's amazing that we know, at least good lot of present day people know so little about him. So it gave me a good excuse when Dr. Ramaswamy invited me to talk on PCRA, and a good excuse to know about this great man, and therefore I personally thank him. And I may add here that I could not get more about this person in the time that I had at my disposal. Unfortunately, when I went to the web also, not much was available to me. So possibly it is high time that somebody puts in effort to bring out more about this great son of India, who was a scientist, an industrialist, a social worker, and a Gandhian, a rare mix of these extraordinary qualities you don't find in another individual. Thank you.
ಇವತ್ತು ನಾವು ಈ ಸ್ಥಿತಿಗೆ ತಲುಪೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಇವತ್ತು ಭಾರತದ ಕಂಪ್ಯೂಟರ್ ಸೈನ್ಸ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಮುಂದಿದೆ ಅದು ಇಂತೆಲ್ಲ ಕೇಳ್ತೀವಲ್ಲ, ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಹೇಗೆ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಆಯಿತು, ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಅಡಿಪಾಯ ಹಾಕಿದವರು ಯಾರು ಅಂಥವ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ತಿಳಿಸೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಏನೂ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ಇಲ್ವಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಬಹಳ ದುಃಖವಾಗತ್ತೆ. ಅದು ಒಂದೊಂದು ಹಂತನೂ ಕೂಡ ಅದು ಎಷ್ಟು ಹರಡಿಸಿತ್ತು ಅನ್ನೋದು ಆ ಚರಿತ್ರೆ ಓದಿದಾಗಷ್ಟೇ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗತ್ತೆ. ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಆಧುನಿಕ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಬರಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಇವರು ಬನ್ನಿ ಸರ್ ಪ್ಲೀಸ್ ಕಮ್, ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಆಧುನಿಕ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಬರಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋ ಆಂದೋಲನವನ್ನು ರಾಜಾ ರಾಮಮೋಹನ್ ರಾಯರು ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದು 18ನೇ ಶತಮಾನದ ಕೊನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ. ಹೀಗಾಗಿ ಅದು ಒಂದು ಹಂತಕ್ಕೆ ತಲುಪೋದಕ್ಕೆ 120 ವರ್ಷ ಹಿಡಿಯಿತು ಲೆಕ್ಕ ಹಾಕ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಪ್ರತಿಬಂಧಕಗಳು ಇರಬೇಕು, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಏನೇನು, ಮತ್ತು ಇದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಅವರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು, ಮಕಾಲೆ ಕಾಲದಿಂದ ಈಚೆಗೆ ಆಧುನಿಕ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಬಂದದ್ದು. ಅದು ಕೂಡ ಸುಲಭ ಆಗಿರಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಒಂದೊಂದು ಹಂತದಲ್ಲೂ ರಾಮಮೋಹನ್ ರಾಯವರು ಆಧುನಿಕ ಪಾಶ್ಚಾತ್ಯ ರೀತಿಯ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಬರಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಉದಾರವಾಗಿ ಏನೋ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಅದು ಇಲ್ಲಿಯ ಇದರಿಂದ ನಮ್ಮ ಶಾಸ್ತ್ರಾಧ್ಯಯನಕ್ಕೆ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಬಾಧೆ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂಥೇಳಿ ಸ್ಥಳೀಯರು ಅದನ್ನು ವಿರೋಧ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಸ್ಥಳೀಯರು ಮಾತ್ರವಲ್ಲ, ಆಧುನಿಕ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಬಂದರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಈ ಆ್ಯಂಟಿಕ್ವಿಟಿ ಸ್ಟಡಿಗೆ ವಿರೋಧ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಬ್ರಿಟಿಷರೇ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಜನ ವಿರೋಧ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಸಂಸ್ಕೃತ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣನೇ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಪ್ರಗತಿ ಹೊಂದಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಜೇಮ್ಸ್ ಪ್ರಿನ್ಸೆಪ್ ಅವನು ಹೀ ಕ್ಯಾಂಪೇನ್ಡ್. ಹೀಗಾಗಿ ಸುಮಾರು 10-15 ವರ್ಷ ಅದೊಂದು ಬಣ ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಸಂಸ್ಕೃತ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರೋತ್ಸಾಹ ಮುಂದುವರಿಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದು, ಆಧುನಿಕ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಬರಿಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋ ಮಕಾಲೆ ಮುಂತಾದವ್ರದ್ದು. ಸುಮಾರು ಒಂದು 10-15 ವರ್ಷವೇ ಈ ವಿವಾದ ನಡೆದು ಕಡೆಗೆ ಆಗಿನ ಗವರ್ನರ್ ಜನರಲ್ ಬೆಂಟಿಂಗ್ಗೆ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಈಗಿನ ಸನ್ನಿವೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾರತಕ್ಕೆ ಆಧುನಿಕ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣದ ಅಗತ್ಯ ಇದೆ, ಇಂಗ್ಲೆಂಡ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಲಭ್ಯವಾಗಿರುವಂಥ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣದ ಅಗತ್ಯ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಅನಿಸಿ ಕಡೆಗೆ ಅದು ಆಯಿತು ಅಂತ ತಿಳ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. ಅದು ಹಾಗೆ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ನಿರ್ಣಯ ಆದಮೇಲೂ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಒಂದು 50-60 ವರ್ಷ ಆದಮೇಲೆ ತಾನೇ ಈ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಆಧುನಿಕ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಬರೋಕ್ಕೆ ಶುರುವಾಯಿತು. ಅದು ಬಹುಮಟ್ಟಿಗೆ 20ನೇ ಶತಮಾನದ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭದ ವೇಳೆಗೆ ಅಂತಲೇ ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು. ಅಷ್ಟರ ಮುಂಚೆ ಇವರು ಈ ಜಗದೀಶ್ ಚಂದ್ರ ಬೋಸ್ ಆಯಿತು, ಮತ್ತು ಪ್ರಫುಲ್ಲಚಂದ್ರ ರಾಯ್ ಆಯಿತು, ಅವರು ದೇವರ್ ಲೈಕ್ ಓಯಸಿಸ್, ದೇವರ್ ಇಂಡಿವಿಜುವಲ್ ಅಚೀವರ್ಸ್. ಆದರೆ ಆಧುನಿಕ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಇನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಷನಲೈಸ್ ಆಗೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಇನ್ನೂ ದೀರ್ಘಕಾಲ ಹಿಡೀತು. 20ನೇ ಶತಮಾನದ ಆರಂಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಬನಾರಸ್ ಹಿಂದೂ ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯವನ್ನು ಸ್ಥಾಪಿಸಿದ ಮದನ್ ಮೋಹನ್ ಮಾಲ್ವೀಯರು ಬಹಳ ಶ್ರಮ ಪಡಬೇಕಾಯಿತು. ಅದು ಹಣಕ್ಕೆ ಮಾತ್ರವಲ್ಲ, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಬ್ರಿಟಿಷ್ ಸರ್ಕಾರದಿಂದ ಅನುಮತಿ ದೊರಕಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಕ್ಕೇ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಶ್ರಮ ಪಡಬೇಕಾಯಿತು. ಆದರೆ ಅವರು ಪ್ರಭಾವಿ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ ಆಗಿದ್ದರಿಂದ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ವರ್ಷಗಳ ಶ್ರಮದ ಮೇಲೆ ಅದು ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಯಿತು. ಹೀಗಾಗಿ ಇಂಥ ದುರ್ಭರವಾದ ಸನ್ನಿವೇಶದ ನಡುವೆ ಇಂಥ ಸಮುನ್ನತವಾದ ಸಾಧನೆಯನ್ನು ಮಹೇಂದ್ರಾಲ್ ಸರ್ಕಾರ್ ಅವರು, ಜಗದೀಶ್ ಚಂದ್ರ ಬೋಸ್ ಅವರು, ಪ್ರಫುಲ್ಲ ಚಂದ್ರ ರಾಯರು ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ಅಂದರೆ ಅವರ ಔನ್ನತ್ಯ ಎಷ್ಟು ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಲೆಕ್ಕ ಹಾಕ್ಬೋದು. ಇನ್ನು ಪ್ರಫುಲ್ಲ ಚಂದ್ರ ರಾಯ್ ಅವರು ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಯಾಗಿ ಎಂಥ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ ಅದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಕೂಡ ಅವರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಹೇಗೆ ತಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದ ಅಷ್ಟು ಹಣವನ್ನು ಅವರು ಉದಾರವಾಗಿ ದಾನ ಕೊಟ್ಟರು, ಆದರೆ ಆವತ್ತೇ ಬೆಳಿಗ್ಗೆ ಒಂದಾಣೆ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಖರ್ಚು ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ತನ್ನ ಸಹಾಯಕನ ತರಾಟೆಗೆ ತೊಗೊಂಡಿದ್ದರು. ಅವರ ಕತೆ ಪೂರ್ತಿ ಹೇಳಲಿಲ್ಲ, ಅದರಿಂದ ಹೇಳಿಬಿಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು ಬಾಳೆಹಣ್ಣು ಆರೋಗ್ಯಕರ ಅಂತ ಯಾರೋ ಹೇಳಿದರು. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಆ ಕಾಲದಲ್ಲಿ ಬಹುಶಃ ಒಂದಾಣೆಗೆ 2-3 ಬಾಳೆಹಣ್ಣು ಬರ್ತಾಯಿತ್ತು ಅಂತ ಕಾಣುತ್ತೆ. ಅದನ್ನು ತಂದು ಕೊಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಇವರ ಸಹಾಯಕ ಒಬ್ಬ ಇದ್ದ. ಒಂದು ಸಲ ಏನಾಯಿತು, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬಾಳೆಹಣ್ಣು ಹಗ್ಗ ಆಗಿತ್ತು ಅಂಥೇಳಿ ಒಂದು ವರಾಣೆ ಕೊಟ್ಟು 5-6 ಬಾಳೆಹಣ್ಣು ತಂದುಬಿಟ್ಟ ಅವನು, ಹಗ್ಗ ಆಗಿತ್ತು ಅಂಥೇಳಿ. ಇವರು ಅಲ್ಲಪ್ಪ ನನಗೆ ಬೇಕಾದ 2 ಬಾಳೆಹಣ್ಣು ನೀನು 5 ಯಾಕೆ ತಂದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೊರಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಇಲ್ಲ, ಹಗ್ಗ ಆಗಿತ್ತು ತಂದೆ ಅಂದ. ನೀನು 2 ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಿದೆ. ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ ನನಗೆ ಬೇಡದೇ ಇದ್ದ ಬಾಳೆಹಣ್ಣು ತಂದೆ, ಅರ್ಧಾಣೆ ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗಿ ನೀನು ಖರ್ಚು ಮಾಡಿದೀಯ. ಇದು ದೇಶದ ಸ್ವತ್ತು. ಈ ಅರ್ಧಾಣೆ ನನ್ನ ಸ್ವತ್ತಲ್ಲ, ದೇಶದ ಸ್ವತ್ತು. ಹೀಗಾಗಿ ನನ್ನಿಂದ ದೇಶಕ್ಕೆ ಅಪರಾಧವಾಗಿದೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಪರಿಹಾರವಾಗಿ ನಾನು ಇನ್ನು 2 ದಿವಸ ಉಪವಾಸ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂಥೇಳಿ ಅವರು ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಪರಿಹಾರ ಸೂಚಿಸಿದ್ರು. ಇನ್ನು 2 ದಿವಸ ನಾನು ಬಾಳೆಹಣ್ಣು ತಿನ್ನೋದಿಲ್ಲ, ಉಪವಾಸ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂತ. ಅದಾಯ್ತಲ್ಲ. ಇದಾದ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಹೊತ್ತಾದ ಮೇಲೆ ಆತ ಈ ಡೊನೇಷನ್ಗೋಸ್ಕರ ಬಂದರು. ಆಗ ಇವನು ಕೇಳಿದ್ರು, ಬ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಅಕೌಂಟಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟಿದೆ ಅಂತ. 3100 ರೂಪಾಯಿ ಏನೋ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ 3000 ಚೆಕ್ ಬರೆದು ಕೊಟ್ಟರು. ಇದು ಪ್ರಫುಲ್ಲ ಚಂದ್ರ ರಾಯ್. ಅವರು ಅಷ್ಟೋ ಉನ್ನತ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಯಾಗಿದ್ದರು, ಎಷ್ಟು ಸರಳವಾಗಿರ್ತಾಯಿದ್ರು ಅನ್ನೋದು ಇಡೀ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲ ದಂತಕಥೆ ಆಗಿಬಿಟ್ಟಿತ್ತು. 1926ರಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು ಮೈಸೂರು ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಕಾನ್ವೊಕೇಶನ್ ಅಡ್ರೆಸ್ ಕೊಡೋಕ್ಕೆ ಬಂದರು. ಆಗ ಅವರ ಸರಳತೆ ನೋಡಿ ಜನ ಎಲ್ಲ ಮುಗ್ಧರಾಗಿಬಿಟ್ರು. ಅದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ತಿತಾ ಶರ್ಮಾ ಅವರು ವಿಶ್ವ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಸಂಪಾದಕೀಯವನ್ನೇ ಬರೆದರು. ಇಷ್ಟು ಉನ್ನತ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ ಇಷ್ಟು ಸರಳವಾಗಿದ್ದಾರೆಯೇ ಅಂತ ನೋಡಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಯೂನಿವರ್ಸಿಟಿಯ ರುಮಾಲುಗಳೆಲ್ಲ, ಆ ರುಮಾಲುಗಳ ಮೇಲೆ ಇರುವ ಕಾಂತಿ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಒಳಗಾದರೂ ಇಳಿದೀತೇನೋ ಅಂತ ಆಶಿಸೋಣ. ಹೀಗೆಲ್ಲ ವ್ಯಂಗ್ಯವಾಗಿ ತಿತಾ ಶರ್ಮಾ ಅವರು ಸಂಪಾದಕೀಯ ಬರೆದಿದ್ದರು. ಅಂಥ ದೊಡ್ಡ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಯ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ತುಂಬ ಮಾಹಿತಿ ಪೂರ್ಣವಾಗಿ, ಅಧ್ಯಯನಪೂರ್ಣವಾಗಿ, ಸಮಗ್ರವಾಗಿ ಅವರ ಜೀವನ ಚರಿತ್ರೆಯನ್ನು ನಮಗೆ ತಿಳಿಸಿಕೊಟ್ಟ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ GS ರಂಗನಾಥ್ ಅವರಿಗೆ ತಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರ ಪರವಾಗಿ, ಗೋಖಲೆ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಯ ಪರವಾಗಿ ಕೃತಜ್ಞತೆಯನ್ನು ಸಲ್ಲಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇನೆ.